At Christmas dinner, my father stood up, pointed across the table at a man he'd never met, and shouted, "Thief, get out of my house." Forks froze. Wine glasses paused midair. The stranger, calm, polite, invited by me, set his napkin down and looked genuinely puzzled. And then, before anyone could say a word, there was a sharp knock at the front door. 3 officers stepped into our dining room. My father's face went from righteous fury to something I'd never seen before. Fear, because the police weren't there for the stranger he'd just accused. They were there for him. The night everything collided. My name is Hannah Lewis. I was 30 years old that Christmas, a high school English teacher, the eldest child of a man our small town called Honest Jim. Honest Jim Lewis from Lewis Auto, the radio ads said. Salt of the earth, people at church called him. My students knew him as the guy who sponsored the football jerseys and handed out free oil change coupons at the fall fair. I knew him as the man who counted every penny anyone else spent and never once thought he'd have to account for his own. 2 days before Christmas, my mother called. "Your father wants everyone here," she said. "Christmas Eve dinner. Family only. Everyone." I asked, "Even Josh?" My younger brother had been finding himself at various friends' couches for a year. "Even Josh," she said. "He promised to behave." And she hesitated. "Feel free to bring a friend if you want." Her tone on that last word said, "We both know who I mean." I looked at my phone, where another message blinked in the notification bar. "Detective Alan Price. We're ready whenever you are. If you still want to go through with it, Christmas Eve works on our end." Alan, the stranger my father would soon accuse. I took a breath. "I'll be there, Mom," I said, "and I'm bringing someone." 2. Honest Jim and the way things worked. To understand how we ended up with cops in our dining room and my father in handcuffs, you need to know who he was to everyone else and who he was to us. James Lewis grew up poor. Bare feet in winter. Spam for dinner. Don't answer the door because it's probably a bill collector. Poor. He liked telling that story. Over and over. We had nothing, he'd say, stabbing a finger at the table. "Everything I've got, I earned with these hands. No one ever gave me a damn thing." Which wasn't entirely true. My grandfather, a quiet mechanic, had given him a job at his shop. My grandmother had given him free childcare when I was born at 21. My mother, Linda, had given up nursing school to help him build Lewis Auto into a proper small business. But in Dad's lexicon, getting help and being shameful were the same thing. So we never called it help. We called it family. What family meant in our house was simple. Dad worked. Mom organized. I adapted. Josh drifted. If a kid at school stole something, Dad would shake his head and say, "Trash." That's what happens when people don't teach their kids right from wrong. If a story came on the news about fraud, he'd snort, "Crooks. They should throw away the key." When the church passed around a second collection for mission work, he'd drop in a check with his name in clear view. "Can't trust half these charities," he'd say on the drive home. But Pastor Tom's a good man. He knows where it's going. I grew up thinking my father was the moral barometer of our town. I also grew up watching my mother flinch every time the phone rang after 9 p.m., watching Dad come back from late nights at the shop, smelling not just of motor oil, but whiskey, watching envelopes marked past due pile up on the hall table until Grandma came over, flipped through them, and wrote a quiet check. She never told me what she wrote the checks for. But the night before she died, she called me to her hospital bed and grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. "Don't let him make you responsible for his mistakes," she rasped. "He'll try. He won't even know he's doing it. But he will." I didn't know what she meant. Not then. 3. The first crack. The first time I realized my father might not be so honest was over a church bake sale. I was 25. Mom had been treasurer for the women's ministry for years. They raised money for everything from school supplies to food baskets. Every cookie, every dollar has to be accounted for, she'd say, tapping her ledger after the holiday bazaar that year. Mom locked the cash box in the drawer beside the fridge, like always. I'll take it to the bank Monday, she said. She never got the chance. On Sunday afternoon, she opened the drawer for the box and gasped. Empty. All that was left was a folded note. It said, in Dad's hurried scrawl, borrowed. We'll put back. J. Her face went white. What did he do? I asked. She swallowed. I'll ask him, she said. That night, after church, Dad walked in whistling. Mom met him at the kitchen table, hands shaking, cash box on the table between them. What is this? She demanded, waving the note. He shrugged. I told you, he said. Borrowed. Guys at the shop organized a card game. I didn't have cash on hand. I'll put it back before your deposit. Don't make it a thing. It is a thing, she said. That's not your money. It's our money, he said. We tithe. We donate. I keep this family afloat with the church's fundraiser cash. I blurted. He shot me a look. I said I'll put it back. He repeated. He didn't. On Monday, Mom used our grocery money to cover the deposit rather than admit to Pastor Tom the shortfall. I'll make it up next month. Dad promised. Next month came and went. So did the month after that. Mom started tutoring extra shifts at the Adult Learning Center. Dad kept playing cards. We all have our vices. Grandma said, lips thin. I saw the pattern then. My father didn't steal from strangers. Not if you asked him. He borrowed from people who loved him, people who wouldn't call the police, people who, in his mind, he was owed compensation from for all his hard work. That line blurred further when Mr. Johnson, one of his elderly customers, gave him power of attorney to handle some bills while he was in rehab. He trusts me, Dad said proudly. He should hire a professional. I muttered. When Mr. Johnson's niece showed up at Lewis Auto one day, accusing Dad of draining her uncle's account, he laughed at her in the waiting room. He authorized every check, he'd said. Just because you thought there'd be more inheritance doesn't mean I stole it. Mom believed him. The town mostly did too. The police shrugged. No one wanted to challenge Honest Jim. Except me. And by then, I knew better than to say too much. Whenever I did, Mom would say, he's still your father. Don't forget everything he's done for you. Josh would say, stop being dramatic. Hannah, you're just mad. He doesn't pay your rent. For the record, Dad had never paid my rent, or my tuition, or my car. I did. He liked to forget that. For the audit and the detective, the real break in the story came at school, not at home. I advised juniors and seniors on college applications and financial aid. A lot of them don't understand loan terms. A lot of parents don't either. Part of my job is helping families not get scammed. So when the school's accounting clerk, Mrs. Benson, mentioned an issue with the driver's Ed Scholarship Fund, my antenna went up. It's probably nothing, she'd said, wrinkling her brow. But the numbers don't quite match. The funds held at Midland Bank. We got a notice about irregular withdrawals. Who has access? I'd asked. She'd shrugged. Just the signers, she said. Me, the principal, and the sponsor. The sponsor? Lewis Auto, as in Dad. A pit formed in my stomach. Has anyone asked him? I managed. She sighed. Principal tried. She said, Jim got offended. Said he was insulted. Anyone would think he'd touch scholarship money. Blamed the bank for errors. Honestly, I'd ignore it if Midland hadn't suggested we talk to the police just to be safe. I sat with that for a day, then another. I wanted to believe Dad, but the bake sale, Mr. Johnson, The late Notice's grandma had bailed out quietly, the way borrowing always meant someone else covers the gap. I couldn't unsee the pattern. I also couldn't bring myself to march into a police station and accuse my father of embezzling from teenagers. So I did what felt safer. I called Grandma's lawyer, Ms. Wagner's office. The receptionist said, "How can I help you?" "It's actually her colleague I need to speak to." A familiar voice cut in. "This is Detective Alan Price on Secondment. Is this Hannah Lewis?" I hadn't realized the number I dialed had been forwarded. Yes, I stammered. "We've had some inquiries about local scholarship funds," he said. "Your name came up as someone who might understand how they're supposed to work." So that's how I met Alan. Tall, quiet, late 30s. He had the kind of presence that didn't scream cop at first glance. He looked more like a tired high school coach. He asked good questions. He didn't rush to judgment. He also didn't let me dodge. "I'm not asking you to throw your father under the bus," he said as we sat in a coffee shop after school. "I'm asking you if, based on what you know of him, you find it impossible to believe he'd move money around in ways that don't look good on paper." "I find it uncomfortably easy to believe," I admitted. He nodded. "We already have some evidence," he said. "Bank records, signatures, scholarship withdrawals marked as administrative fees that don't line up with invoices. We had to make sure we weren't crazy. Hearing your stories confirms a pattern." My chest tightened. "What happens now?" I asked. "We build a case," he said, quietly. "This isn't a TV show. We don't burst into businesses without cause. We interview people. We follow the money. If we find enough, we get a warrant. Then, regardless of how the town feels about Honest Jim, the facts speak." "What do you need from me?" I asked. "Two things," he said. "One, your testimony about the bake sale and any other borrowing you've personally witnessed. Two, a heads up if your father suddenly talks about refinancing property or moving assets. People under financial pressure make riskier moves. It helps to know when they're desperate." I nodded, throat thick. "Why are you telling me all this?" I asked. "Isn't it supposed to be confidential?" He gave a half smile. "It is," he said. "But whether this goes to trial or not, your family will be impacted. You deserve the chance to put up some emotional armor before the storm hits." That was kinder than I expected. 5. How Christmas became a trap for him, not me. When Dad texted about the family meeting, I forwarded the message to Alan. "Me, this is what you warned about. He wants me to bring Grandma's folder." Alan, "You think he's trying to tap your inheritance?" Me, "I know he is. He's been hinting for months." Alan, "Then you have a choice. You can say no and walk away, or you can let us use the meeting to serve the warrant in a controlled environment." I stared at that text. I could already hear the accusation. "You sick the cops on your own father." But the reality was the cops were already circling. The bank, the school, Mr. Johnson's niece. Dad had put himself in their sights. My involvement just changed the backdrop. I agreed. We planned. Alan would come as my friend from church to dinner. Undercover, technically. He'd sit, observe, and give a discreet signal when the warrant team was in position outside. Dad would think the stranger was an outsider to blame. That fit his pattern too. What he didn't know was that the outsider was the one trained to see through his performance. Mom was in the dark at first. I considered telling her. I didn't. Not because I wanted her blindsided, but because I knew what she'd do. Beg me to stop. Protect Dad from consequences. She had a master's degree in CYA where Jim Lewis was concerned. So I went alone into that knowledge. Christmas Eve arrived. I showed up at the house at 4:30, a cheesecake in one hand, Alan behind me with a bottle of sparkling cider. "Mom, this is Alan," I said when she opened the door. "We worked together on the scholarship committee." Partially true. It wasn't the school's committee. It was the county's fraud task force now. She gave him a polite once-over and ushered us in. Dad eyed him from the recliner. "Who's this?" he asked. "Alan," I said. "He's new to town. Doesn't have any family nearby. I didn't want him spending Christmas alone." It was a flimsy lie, but it played to Dad's ego. "Always room for one more at the Lewis table," he said grandly, shaking Alan's hand. "I'm Jim." Alan smiled, just the right amount. "Thank you for having me," he said. "Hannah speaks highly of you." I almost choked on my own tongue. That part wasn't true. But Dad preened. "She does, huh," he said. "Well, I try." Josh stumbled in an hour later, smelling of weed and stale beer. He barely glanced at Alan. "Hey, sis," he said, clapping me on the back. "Who's the narc?" "Friend," I said through gritted teeth. "Relax," Alan said with a calm chuckle, not taking the bait. "I'm off duty for the holidays." Dad stiffened slightly at that phrase. Off duty, but then laughed. "Cop," he said. "That's what we need around here. Keep people honest." "Something like that," Alan replied. Dinner was tense. Roast beef, mashed potatoes, Grandma's china, Christmas lights blinking over a room full of secrets. At some point, Dad cleared his throat and nodded at my folder, which I'd laid beside my plate. "Let's get business out of the way before dessert," he said. "That okay?" I glanced at Alan. He gave the tiniest nod. Showtime. 6 accusations and a knock at the door. Dad stood, picking up the stack of documents from the sideboard. "Most of you know your grandmother left this house to Hannah here," he began. "And some money. I've been thinking about how to make that work for the whole family." Josh smirked. "I've been thinking about that too," he muttered. Dad ignored him. "The bank doesn't care about wills," Dad went on. "They care about who's on the deed. Right now, that's split between me and Hannah in a way that makes refinancing a nightmare." "That's not what the will says," I interjected mildly. "You have a life estate, not co-ownership." "Legal mumbo-jumbo," he scoffed. "The point is, the house is part of our history. Ryan comes back, Josh crashes here, your mother and I host holidays. It's not right that one person holds all the cards." Alan watched quietly, eyes flicking between us. Dad held up a deed transfer form with a flourish. "So here's what I propose," he said. "Hannah signs the house over to me. I use it as collateral to clean up everything, taxes, repairs, a bit to help Josh get out of that dump he's in. Then, when I'm gone, it all comes back to you kids. Even Stephen, except for the part where I take all the risk," I said. He frowned. "It's not risk," he insisted. "It's trust. Family trust." He chuckled at his own pun. No one else did. Alan sipped his water. "I don't think I can agree to that," I said. Dad's jaw clenched. "You haven't even heard the details," he said. "I know the details," I replied. "I've seen your bank statements." His head snapped toward me. Mom's face drained of color. "Hannah," she whispered. "You left them on the table," I said, "next to the collection box from church." Alan's eyes sharpened at that. "I bring in money," Dad said slowly. "I also use money, same as everyone. You think you know everything because you look at a few numbers." "I think I know enough," I said. "Enough to say I won't be signing anything that turns Grandma's last gift into collateral for debts I didn't incur." He slammed the papers onto the table. "You ungrateful," he began. A glass clinked. We all turned. Alan had set his fork down. "Mr. Lewis," he said politely, "may I ask a question?" Dad bristled. "This is family business," he said. "No offense, officer. Just Alan tonight," he said. "And the question is simple. Have you told Hannah the full extent of the liens already on this property? And about the investigation into scholarship funds tied to your business?" Mom gasped. Dad's face went from red to ashy. "What the hell are you talking about?" he demanded. Alan reached into his inside jacket pocket. For a wild second, I thought he was pulling a gun. Instead, he pulled out a badge, set it gently on the table. "I'm Detective Alan Price," he said quietly. "Clay County Financial Crimes Unit. You could have heard a fork drop. Josh actually did. It clattered onto his plate." Dad stared, then barked a laugh that sounded more like a cough. "This some kind of joke," he said. "You brought a cop into my home, Hannah?" "Technically, you invited him," I said quietly. "You said family only. He's here to make sure the rest of Grandma's family doesn't get dragged down by your choices." His gaze snapped to me. "You little—" Before he could finish, there was a firm knock at the front door. 3 raps. Everyone jumped. Mom rose halfway, then froze. Alan stood. "I believe that's for you, Mr. Lewis," he said. Dad stalked to the hallway, muttering. He flung the door open. 2 uniformed officers and 1 plainclothes woman stood there. "James Lewis?" the woman asked. "Yeah," he said. "And you are?" "Detective Carter," she said, holding up her ID. "We have a warrant to search these premises and place you under arrest for embezzlement and fraud." Everything slowed. Dad's mouth opened and closed. "Embezzlement," he repeated. "From who?" "The Clay County Driver Education Scholarship Fund," she said, "and several elderly clients, including a Mr. Harold Johnson." The room behind him erupted. Josh swore. Mom started crying. I just sat, because I'd known this was coming. I just hadn't expected it to happen under the glow of Christmas lights. "This is ridiculous," Dad sputtered. "Ask anyone in this town. I'm honest, Jim. I've never stolen a thing in my life." Alan stepped into the hallway. "That's actually not what the bank records show," he said calmly, "and not what we heard from multiple witnesses, including your daughter." Dad's head whipped toward me. "You went to the cops about me?" he shouted. "I told the truth to someone who asked," I said, standing now. "About the bake sale. About Mr. Johnson. About the scholarship fund. They did the rest." "You do this to your own father," he yelled. His voice cracked on father. I swallowed. "You did this to yourself," I said quietly. "I'm just refusing to cover it up." The officers handcuffed him, read him his rights, walked him past the nativity scene in the front yard. The neighbors peered through their blinds. Inside, Josh ranted about setups and witch hunts. Mom sank into a chair, sobbing, "He's a good man, he's just bad with money." Alan stayed. He didn't gloat, didn't say, "I told you so," just took notes, answered questions, and gently declined when Mom begged him to make it go away. "I can't make the evidence disappear," he said. "Neither can your daughter. The best thing you can do is get a lawyer and start dealing with this honestly before it gets worse." 7. Aftermath, what we pay for. Dad took a plea. Months of legal wrangling ended in a deal: restitution, probation, mandatory counseling, and a ban from handling finances for any business or charity. He complained, said the justice system was broken, said he'd just moved money around like everyone did, said people were making a mountain out of a molehill. The scholarship fund got some money back. Mr. Johnson's niece got some for her uncle's care. The church quietly chose a new treasurer. Honest Jim became, for a while, that guy. Some people still defended him. "He's done so much for the town," they said. "Everyone makes mistakes." I didn't argue. People see what they want. What mattered to me was this. For the first time in my life, my father's actions cost him more than they cost everyone around him. He had to sell some toys, the boat, the extra truck. He had to move into a smaller place, pay rent. He had to learn that I worked hard doesn't make theft less illegal. As for our relationship, it didn't end, but it changed. He was angry with me, deeply. He said I betrayed him, that I'd chosen strangers over blood. It wasn't strangers, I replied once. It was kids who needed that scholarship more than you needed another weekend at the casino. In quieter moments, I saw something else in his eyes. Shame. Maybe someday that shame will turn into accountability. Maybe it won't. Either way, I sleep at night. Grandma's house. I rented it out, legally above board, to a young couple with a baby. Their check goes into the fund Grandma meant it to. For maintenance. For taxes. For my future. I keep spreadsheets. I pay myself a modest owner draw. I do not, under any circumstances, let my father near the rent. Josh stopped asking me for money, at least directly. He got a job at a warehouse out of town. We text occasionally, mostly memes and you up messages at midnight that I ignore. Mom moved into a small apartment near my place. She enrolled in a financial literacy course through the Adult Learning Center where she used to tutor. The irony isn't lost on either of us. One night, after class, she knocked on my door, holding a binder. They were talking about enablers today. She said, how people like your dad don't get away with things alone. They get help from spouses who cover checks, from kids who clean up behind them. I nodded. She sat at my table, looked at me, and said something I'd waited my whole life to hear. I'm sorry I made you the adult when you were still a child. We cried. We talked. We started slowly to build something new that wasn't built on pretending. 8. What Christmas taught me about thieves. The night my father accused a stranger of theft at Christmas dinner, he was half right. There was a thief at our table. It just wasn't the man he pointed at. It was the man doing the pointing, the one who'd been stealing not just money but peace and trust and the chance for other people to stand on their own. For years, thieves don't always wear masks and sneak into houses. Sometimes they sit at the head of the table, carve the roast, say grace, and tell everyone else how immoral the world has become. Sometimes they truly believe they're owed what they take. Sometimes they convince everyone else of that too, until someone, some ungrateful daughter, some disloyal niece, some dramatic sister, says, no more, not with my name, not with my silence. If you've got a honest Jim in your life, a person everyone insists could never do such a thing, remember, good reputations do not balance bad ledgers. Love does not erase theft. Loyalty does not mean covering for crime. You do not have to set yourself on fire to keep a liar warm. And if someday police walk into your family's Christmas dinner and people whisper that you brought this on by telling the truth, know this: you didn't bring the cops. The thief did. You just opened the door.